Hey folks, I thought it might be fun to talk real briefly about and kind of catch up on a couple of unique tanks that I made. Now, one is the Steampunk tank and the other is the Tiny Island tank. Aside from sitting right next to each other, they're kind of both built with a very similar idea. This was built kind of trying to make I guess a sort of an on-the-top filter or maybe like a bog filter or something similar to the way a bog filter would work in a pond or something like that. I got the idea after I built the one for my pond. And I thought it'd be fun to just kind of run water up into basically an area that was just made to grow plants. In my case, I have wabikusa balls, which absorb the water and bring it in, and they're basically made of crushed up substrate. I started out with some commercially purchased wabikusa balls for this one, and then eventually made my own by grinding up substrate and peat moss and stuff and sort of forming them into little bricks. So I made wabikusa bricks and I put it in here. That combination of peat moss mixed with that substrate gives water somewhere to wick into, and then the plants somewhere to kind of go down and get some grab on and get nutrients and stuff. So it's been really good for things like anubias and some other plants that I have. The cardinals especially do super well in here. I've been able to experiment with buse and a couple of other plants. In fact, I've got, I think it's called Hygrophila Taiwan or Japan. I can't remember which one, but I've got this one plant in here that is just it's sort of a viney plant, and it's taking over everything. So I'm probably going to have to get in here and trim it out. Let's take a look. Alright, let's see what's going on under here. I usually start by peeling this away. I usually just leave a little sprig of it. It'll come back. You can take this and throw it in your aquarium at this point, and it does okay. I like to throw it in the sump sometimes. It's a nice one to give away to people because it grows so readily, and it can really help somebody get their tank started. It's like it grabbed some buse with it when it came up. I've got some buse planted in here in the smog down in here. Smog bottom. Yeah, this obviously is not doing too well, whatever this is. But we're going to pull all of this out and set it aside. And with that out, we can see that we've got some buse plants going here. We've got a couple of blooms coming up and some new growth coming up right here. Here's an old bloom, and here's a new bloom, and here's another new bloom that's kind of coming up. The buse will bloom sort of like anubias does, with these little flowers and stuff that kind of come up. Got a little bit more of this vine plant going back here. Don't really need much of it. Almost none to get it going again. So I pull it out pretty ruthlessly because it is just as ruthless. The other plant that grows out of control in here is the cardinal plant, and I like to just kind of tone it down once in a while and do a little clip on it. I never pull it out completely because it's a good filter plant. And this is another one. You could probably plant this in your aquarium. I don't think it's going to do quite as well. Probably do okay, but not quite as well in your tank, but you could. It branches off into a bunch of directions too. You can sit and trim it and play with it and get it to do things you want. Yeah, if you look down in here in the water, it looks pretty nasty, huh? Yeah, that's just like really wet, really shallow wet water. But it's also the mechanical filter and the biological filter and everything else. It's all happening inside of here. And the plants are helping absorb those nutrients and stuff. Another thing I like to do while I have this off is take a paper towel and give the glass a quick wipe off. I've been really fortunate in that whatever this is made of doesn't seem to want to rust, unlike the one that I picked out for the island tank that I had to switch out for that very reason. Yes, this has been a really, really good lid. Just kind of found it by accident in an antique store. Just happened across it and was like, oh, I spotted the shape of it in my eye and went, oh my gosh, that's exactly the size that I need for this opening. And it solved a big problem I had when I was putting this together, which is how do I steampunk up the glass part up here? A lot of Victorian age stuff had the sort of mimicked real life in miniature with these extra adornments and stuff like that. Little extra adornments and things that are kind of went over and beyond what it took to kind of make something look really pretty and nice. And yeah, giving it a quick wipe helps a lot. This thing does get a little dusty and stuff at times, especially just kind of sitting out. But it's neat. Looks good. So I did the same thing with the Wabikusa balls on the tiny island tank. And but in this one, I just sort of, I took this, it was a tank that was kind of made to split and like be for two betas or a beta and some other things. You know, like to separate fish in a small 5-gallon aquarium. I think that it's probably a little too small in that 5-gallon space to go and split in half. But the way it was designed, it had a box filter that kind of poured over the other side. So I basically did the same thing, but I used that ledge to make a platform, and I set up a Wabikusa bricks on top of that and drilled a hole in the lid that it came with, and I fashioned another aquarium upside down to kind of fit on top of it. And I'm growing things in there, sort of made a little island in there. That's why I call it Tiny Island, if that wasn't obvious. This is such a small container. I mean, it's a 5-gallon tank inside of here with just like a sleeve on top of it. Now this wood, it doesn't take away any gallons from the aquarium, but it doesn't add anything either. So it's a little bit bigger looking, bulkier than it is. And the only filter it's got, I mean, really these are sort of no filter aquariums with a pump. So this has a pump that will take things up to this tray, and then the water just spills over. And over here, the water just kind of gets moved over to the other side just to kind of keep it moving around. It moves over to the other side, and then it spills over in this little waterway right here. But and I could even like lower this and almost make a sort of a paludarium kind of thing, where this is sort of a reservoir of water, and this side is holding you know, just a little bit of water and maybe some emergent plants or something like that. But I decided just to kind of fill this almost all the way up and just let the water cross over and give that the pump then is just sort of circulating it and keeping it from being like super stagnant in one area. There's no mechanical filtration in these beyond just what gets grabbed up in this tray or underneath here where no one can see. There's also no chemical filtration. There's no biomedia or anything like that in there. There's not really deep substrate. I mean, I guess you could kind of, the Wabikusa things maybe maybe kind of fulfilling that role to some degree, but I'm not sure how much. I know that a lot of bacteria, like the theory behind like the bio wheels, if you remember the old marine land bio wheel filters, the theory was that that things like to have oxygen but also be wet all the time. So by kind of getting it wet and then dry, or wet and then out in the air and then wet and then out in the air, that was making a colony for bacteria. I went super hard into the bio wheels. In fact, a lot of my earliest videos were all about how to season bio wheels, and I had a couple of videos about that anyway. But they did work. I mean, I've been able to take tanks that were cycled up and had 2 bio wheels and like swap one of them into a new tank, and then I'd test the water and it would have no problems, or at least I could make a cycle happen really quickly if it wasn't working out too well by swapping out bio wheels and stuff. So it was pretty good. Like so many things, it wasn't the complete answer to, you know, the nitrogen cycle and all the other things that you need to make a healthy aquarium. Having a really healthy growing plants inside of there would probably do just as well as any bio wheel ever made. But for me, early in my fish keeping days and before I really had a lot of plants, it was awesome, and I used them quite a lot. But you might ask, what is living in all these things? Well, in here I have coolie loaches, or danger noodles, as they're known. Uh, I've got about 3 coolie loaches in here. They're the black coolie loaches, just from PetSmart, or something like that. Nothing super fancy, but I love them, and they've been doing well since I put them in there. And I love seeing them in there. I tried to add some banded ones, and they didn't seem to do as well. But I've tried to add them before. They always seem to die. I've only had one banded coolie loach that's survived and done well in my tank. So, and that was in a different tank. I've had a number of other fish in here temporarily that have kind of come and gone. Like I've had, I think I separated a female Inler in here and a couple of other things throughout the years. I've even had cherry shrimp in here. Just to kind of test their survivability. I think coolie loaches will attack and eat those, but I've managed to have them live for a long time, so it's really hard to tell what happened there. Moving over to the other tank, I've got one blue-eyed daisy rice fish that's there. I'd had some blue eyes in here for a little while, and then I pulled them out, and some babies emerged. There were 3 of them. I'm down to just 1. I kind of raised the 3 up in here. The other thing I've got in here is a whole bunch of cull shrimp, a whole bunch of shrimp. I got them at a discount at some store. Like they wanted a whole lot for their Neocaridina shrimp, and I wanted these green ones. And I saw that they had some in another tank that were a lot less expensive, and they were like the random shrimp. They're all kind of culls. So I bought actually a bunch of them and some other ones that sort of looked like tiger shrimp. Now tiger shrimp aren't Neocaridina. They're another thing that I don't know the name of, the scientific name of, the Latin name of, but they don't interbreed, so they can be kept together. And I'm not for certain that that's what I got, but I got a bunch of these different shrimp, and I've kind of put them in here together just to see what the end result will be, which will probably be the all-term brown, but we'll see. But there's some jade green ones, or ones that I'm pretty sure jade greens, and there were a couple of blue ones, and there were a couple of these other tiger striped looking things. So it'll be interesting to see how the shrimp do. I've also put a number of freshwater isopods in here, and they seem to be doing better than they do in other tanks. So that's kind of encouraging and interesting. I did originally want to put something else in here. In fact, I might go get a Mexican crayfish, one of those little orange crayfish or something like that, and put them in there. I originally wanted to do pom-pom crabs and put them in here, but they're kind of expensive and difficult to get, so I probably won't be doing that. So as for plants in the top of these, this one's really super thick and I've got to trim it, but I've got a couple of different kinds of buse that are growing well, kind of on and off of the wabi-kusa balls. They're kind of in the margins around that wabi-kusa ball and stuff. And I'm hoping that they'll grow into really big, interesting specimens like you see in nature photos of where they're from. I tried buse in this thing when I first started it, but I guess I got some bad samples or something. None of them did very well, or I don't know, I didn't do it right, and they melted away and died. There are actually a few that are still alive in here, but I've kind of kept them off into the margins and stuff, a little bit closer to the water so they can make their way out on their own. What has done super well in here is some Nana Petite. Added some Nana Petite Anubias up here. And of course, there's some cardinal plant that's in here. The cardinal plants do incredibly well. They always outgrow their space in this thing, but it's really narrow. This has really tall areas and stuff, and it's really interesting. I've actually got some blooms coming up, and I'm hoping that they all eventually open at the same time. Right now, I've got 1 of 3 that are open, but it looks like I've got another 2 or 3 blooms that are about to open any day now, and that's a really neat thing to see inside of here. Anubias do so much better on the margins than I ever thought. I've got one downstairs that started off in this tank and is now on the back of the 210 just because it's enormous. There's a lot of Anubias in both of these tanks, well, in all of my tanks. It's just a plant that seems to grow super well. I don't know if there's something about my water here that it really likes. but I've been able to have grow it under a lot of different conditions, especially these weird conditions like locked in a little box and stuff. It does super well, and there's a lot of different ways to grow it. So I've enjoyed having that in all these things. It does sort of make a lot of my tanks look the same, so sometimes I overcompensate a little bit with the configurations. But yeah, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Anubias filters most of my tanks. So I've got full information on my builds and how I built or did almost every little thing about this. If you're at all interested, there are playlists that will be listed over here when the video is done, so you can check it out. I did a video a few weeks ago that's basically a tour of the whole house to music. I knew I'd be going through each of these tanks and kind of doing updates as they come along. This tank's approaching its 1-year update. This is when I was working on this last year. And this tank is up on like 5 years, I think. It's about 5 years old. So it's been going for quite a while. Probably 3 years since I redid it and stuff, because it had an initial go. And then I reset it when I wanted to change the plants up and stuff. Other than the inevitable trim that I have to do, especially in this tank, it's got like a much smaller area. And it's been going longer, so everything's like really growing out of control. Aside from the trimmings like that, I don't really have to do much maintenance to any of these. In fact, this one went for several years without a water change and did just fine. I did run the TDS meter in there and found it alarmingly high, so I decided to occasionally pull some water out and stuff just to kind of keep that mineral content down and keep it from being too crazy in there. But I never feel super obligated to change it. I mostly do just to keep the TDS from getting too high. Folks, I'm very excited. Tomorrow I'm going to film another club member, ETAA, that's the East Tennessee Aquatic Association. One of those club members is letting me go tour their house, and they have an amazing setup. And it's really different than what you're typically going to see. So you're going to see that real soon. I'm calling it now. I'm going to film it tomorrow. I'm going to edit it on vacation. You'll be seeing it around the 4th of July, sometime around there. So look forward to that. If you have any questions about this stuff, just leave it down below. I'd be happy to answer. And if you'd like to see the setup video for this, here they are. Here's the setup video for each of those tanks. Until next time, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.